Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today's episode may offend brand new listeners and may make some of you really happy. I don't know. It's called Alpha and Omega, which probably isn't very obvious right off the bat unless you read the description. Which, if you're like me, you kind of like not reading it and then just jumping in and seeing what happens here. There has been a saying, sometimes turned into a meme. It's been going around for a few years. And every time I see it, I just cringe. Because it's usually being posted by someone I know. And it's hard to put it into words how utterly frumpy the entire logic of this saying goes. How, I don't know. I don't even know how to say weak-minded this saying goes, how unobservant this saying goes, how utterly brain-dead the person who posts it must be in real life, how fragile they must be. Inadvertently, they're scapegoaters and they don't know. But the saying will go like this. The saying accuses all men of being afraid of strong women. And it's just a real interesting archetype of a post. Because this will most naturally come from a couple different groups. I don't have any young female friends, okay? I have young female relatives, but they don't post any of this crap. Even my liberal ones, they know better. So it's usually someone, I'd say, maybe between 35 and 60, somewhere in there. They'll post this kind of stuff. And maybe some men have never thought about the concept. You know, there's like, oh, really? Strong woman, weak woman? Oh, I guess never really thought about how strong or weak a woman is. I just like women and I get along with them and everything's fine. I'm assuming the kind of women that post this stuff are women that are having a problem finding a mate. Perhaps. Maybe they've had an isolated experience where something didn't go right in the relationship. And for whatever reason, they want a faux story so that when they come out of the bad relationship, of which may have not been their fault at all, they latch onto this. But I would say it's a tiny, tiny percentage of women that would ever post such a thing. But I've seen it several times the last several years. And by several, I might be totaling up maybe 6 in 3 years. But it's just one of those things you're like, oh, come on. Seriously? You really, 1, read this, 2, thought it was true, and 3, thought it was a really good idea to post it out there, which I guess is the sort of passive-aggressive technique of trying to say, hear me roar. George Carlin opened a routine a couple times with the phrase, isn't it interesting that the women that are for abortion are the exact kind of women you'd never want to have sex with in the first place? I get the feeling that it's sort of those women. Could be wrong. Isn't it interesting, though, when all these classic feminists, I mean, you can go back to, was it Eleanor Roosevelt, which, wow, she was a powerful, intelligent woman, but man, was it Franklin was one accepting guy. So what does Alpha and Omega have to do with this statement? It finally clicked in my brain a few nights ago, such that I could write it down on a piece of paper to tell another friend. And I'm going to assign Alpha and Omega, as it has been literarily referenced several times, as the perfect balance between yin and yang. The man is the yin, the woman is the yang. Makes no difference, but that's how the creators of that saying divide up the sexes. An alpha male is a complete male. He knows his responsibility. He knows his place in society. He uses his attributes of upper body strength to do what he can do that his wife can't do. The omega female is your consummate, strong female who knows her place in society, and she can do things the guys can't. They are equal in different ways. Typically, the man is more left brain, as the Egyptians would say. He is the logical hunter, using his upper body strength and his body strength in general, his endurance, to go out and hunt. The woman is the right brain nurturer. She knows how to build the intellectual capacity of a family. She knows how to raise a child. She knows how to look into a child's eye and see directly into their soul, to know their needs, to provide. She nurtures her man, she nurtures her kids, and she takes care of herself. Now, hopefully, the man is also protecting that institution. He is providing in a traditional sense before the last 40 years. He goes and gets the money, goes and gets the resource. If, for any reason, a man starts to misbehave and belittle his wife and sanction money for favors or behaviors, then he is no longer an alpha. He is slowly turning into a little bitch. And so if you're going to be referencing those guys in your mind as alphas, I'm going to say that's incorrect. A good man is kind. He has chivalry, depending on what kind of woman he has, as her dictated by her preference. He may never utter a swear word in her presence. He treats her like a queen, and she treats him like a king. When they cuddle up together at night, he is loving every morsel of her femininity, and she is loving every morsel of his masculinity. It is a yin and a yang, a balance, a left brain and the right brain. Again, as the Egyptians espoused, it is the job, believe it or not, of the woman to usher the man into full enlightenment. She will usher herself into her enlightenment using the example of her male, because she is more intellectual. He is more myopic. He is more blinders on. I get up and do this thing every day. His needs, like Dr. Laura would say, is sex, food, sleep. Those are his basic fundamental needs. She understands the more abstract because she is right brain. She sees the world as it truly exists. He sees it as a bizarre linear loop until she can convince him, probably through inadvertent subliminal techniques, to grow his right brain. She, over time, if she doesn't already have it, quickly will learn the left side. But she is the usher. She is mother to the entire family, including her alpha male. The statues in Egypt of King Tut will often have his wife with her right arm around his waist, visible on the right side of his ribcage, signifying the relationship and the responsibility model, the nurturing model of the woman, but also the mentor of the man. One is not less than the other in principle. Now, because life is chaotic and has its surprises here and there, in the past, this formula has obviously wobbled within relationships, within marriages, and people will have unfortunate stories about how a particular era in a relationship happened. Sometimes relationships are really good at the beginning and sort of fall apart as two people grow apart. Other times, and there's a couple in my own family where they married out of convenience or obligation and weren't really close at the beginning. And then over 20 years, 30 years, they grew to absolutely be inseparable. Growing to a point where there was nothing and there is nothing that they wouldn't do for their spouse, either way. The alpha in a traditional sense of the nuclear family, when a society is balanced and not being interrupted by agendas, is a honored institution. It is balanced. If there's any envy between the male and the female for each other's capabilities, it is merely an incidental recognition of those capabilities. It is a brief brush with envy. But then there's also a retreat back to their own strengths and their own identity defined by those strengths. So what's the problem? The problem is this, in my opinion. And I do express my opinion in every episode. This one's a very touchy one that I typically don't touch. But I think I'd like to start the dialogue. I'd like to get this one into your mind so you can mulch it, tell me what you think. The problem now is that we have what I believe to be this, I want to call it an alpha female. And the problem with an alpha female is that it really can't complete itself. It can't truly exist, except for maybe 1 in 100 million women could actually possibly pull this completely off, at least on the physical attribute level. But on a mental level, I haven't seen it pulled off yet. I have been told by women that they don't believe their children need fathers. I don't think a father in my entire life experience has ever uttered even the semblance of the inverse phrase. Even though I've got a couple buddies that were stuck with a broken marriage and thus had to raise their children and did amazing jobs at it without the female influence on their side. And they were concerned that the female wasn't there. Some of them had a chance to remarry and replenish that missing resource, and others never had the opportunity. But here's the rub. An alpha female will never be attracted to an alpha male. An alpha female, I think, has a mental psychosis. She's been programmed through gullibility to be something that she is not, to attempt to be something that she is not, instead of honoring what she truly is. And this has nothing to do with being gay. These are straight heterosexual people I'm talking about. But she will inevitably be insecure. Well, she is insecure, which is why she has gone this route in the first place. As much as she thinks she is engaging in acts of heroism and strength, something that an omega female does every single day. The alpha is off, trying to do things that are not meant to be. But because it's a social construct of the mind, she will tend almost unanimously, if she doesn't remain single her entire life, due to an inability to attract someone that she would be attracted to in the first place, almost invariably, the alpha female will be only attracted to a beta male. And we know that there are movements to create beta males. That's why we have more on planet Earth now than ever before. But what is a beta male? A beta male doesn't recognize who he is. He doesn't recognize even the omega female. He doesn't supplant the other side. I have met gay men who are omega females. And they do a damn good job at it. Even if there's no children involved, there's still a partnership and it's balanced. But the beta male is incapable of doing what a traditional male can do. The beta male doesn't conceive of alpha male responsibilities. And I want to repeat that. The beta male cannot and does not conceive of them acting in any way or shape of an alpha male. They can't hunt for food. They can't clean an animal if they happen to stumble upon one that has died recently. They have an inability to protect their female. If there's a noise in the middle of the night, he's a pussycat, hoping that his alpha female will know how to operate a gun. But since the alpha female is built out of nothing but hubris and insecurities and mental illness, in my opinion, she is also incapable. So both of them become victims very quickly of anything that's going on. So there's a lot of conspiracy channels out there which will have, survival prepper services that they co-sponsor their channels with. They sell lots of food, right? And they'll read you this big riot act about how uncertain times are coming. You should have at least 10 weeks of food in your home and water and that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. But let's just say they're right. Let's just say America, and this is just a for instance to drill home the importance of the alpha and omega configuration. Let's say that we are near some sort of apocalyptic thing as punishment for choosing our president and then enforcing that result. And a certain deep state organization wants to punish the United States citizens for doing such a thing. They will show us, is what they're thinking. And they blow up a few major cities. They cut our power supply. They cut our internet, which would be very tough to do because we will turn it back on. A saboteur can only do their thing once, and they better destroy everything because we'll build it back quickly. But let's say that we did enter some sort of modern-day apocalypse. Nothing like the movies necessarily, but you never know. I guarantee you that people in Japan never envisioned their country being ripped apart by water. But indeed that occurred. Catastrophic things that they never thought they would see have already occurred 9 years ago. I misquoted the date, by the way, 2013 on accident. It's 2011 in a previous episode. And so now you are married with children, or you're just married, one of the two. You had your life pretty well dialed in. I mean, 2020 has been hard, but let's just say you figured out a way to stay alive. And now all of a sudden, just finding food to eat is really, really tough. The tank of gas you got in your car, well, that's the last tank of gas you're ever going to have in your car for a while. You could have bars of gold and nothing's going to change anything because this is an apocalyptic kind of situation. The configuration that's going to be well equipped, or I should say, hit the minimums, is going to be your alpha and omega couples. You know why? Because an omega female will learn quickly, if she doesn't already know before the marriage, how to take care of business, to defend her children, to defend even her husband if he's incapacitated or he's taking out targets that way, and she's got to take out targets that way because the family's right here. I've told you guys several times in some of the earlier business episodes that there is an interesting phenomenon that is not taught in business schools because professors who teach business schools typically have no background in ever becoming an entrepreneur. So they're merely repeating what they think is good information for you. If you've ever started a business, you will know how difficult it is to be a single person running a business. Whether you're married or not is immaterial. You are a 1X person. No matter how hard you work, you will never eclipse the work of one person because you are one unit. However, when you partner with someone in a business who is working as hard as you are, the results are bigger than 2X for some reason. It just happens. Example, one of the most successful businesses I ever put together, my buddy and I were making $5,000 a piece a month. This is without taxes being taken out. We did this for a couple months, maybe 3 tops, and eventually said to him, I said, look, we need to form a company because that's going to catalyze everything that we're doing. And he was like, sure, let's do it. So we did it. We formed a C Corp. Thank God, because that got us 2 gigs that wouldn't have come through if we were S. And our first gig out the door went from us collectively making $10K for the 2 of us, and we were making a game apiece for $5K a piece. So 2 games for $10,000. The first gig that we were able to close was a $55,000 deal to make 1 game. Amazing. The next deal I signed was $180,000 to make 1 game on 3 different platforms. It was uphill, uphill, uphill in terms of money. And that's when I looked back at my past and I said, you know what? Every time I've tried to do this by myself, it's like running in water. The second I collaborate with someone who's actually business-minded, because I've collaborated with a lot of folks that are simply wishful thinkers about who they are, God bless them. As soon as I find a partner that works as hard as I do, oh my God, sky's the limit. And the multiplier, I think the almost the minimum multiplier if two people are working really hard at something is 5x. Minimum multiplier. If you really work hard together and get clever, it could be 100x. Easy. I mean, divide $180,000 by $5,000 with two people. That was the X for the next contract we got. Just two of us. The deal I did, actually, two before that, before we started the business, we got $160,000 for three guys. All right. That's the difference between a perfectly balanced, what I would say, nuclear family / almost homogenous family, built out of an alpha and omega parent couple. The kids in the alpha omega family grow up with standards. The divorce rate in a truly alpha omega relationship is very, very low. But once you get these alpha beta, or I should say beta alpha, to maintain chronology in our examples here, oh boy, you got the guy coming in who, when we ask, hey, can you stay and smoke a cigar? Can you hang out at the barbecue? I'm going to call my wife, see if I can do this whole thing. And they just cower down into whatever they're allowed to do. Now, the inverse is not to tell your wife the way it is, by any means. But the inverse typically is the male has a free slot in his schedule. Maybe multiple in a week, maybe one in a week, doesn't matter. But he's already pre-agreed with his partner in life who understands his needs to have male friends because you know why? She wants him to come back that night more alpha. Again, not a person who's going to use money and other things to manipulate her. Those horror stories are not what I'm talking about. Those people have fallen out of the slot. He also wants her to have her female friends because she maintains her femininity by being around other omegas. Now, what is not occurring in an alpha-omega relationship, in my opinion? These are the people that raised me. It wasn't my parents. It was my parents' parents. The dude isn't going to a strip bar. The chick isn't going to a nightclub with their friends and pretending to be single. They're not on, Tinder. They're not on sites trying to hook up on the side with children at home wondering where mommy and daddy are. No. There's probably a configuration of a beta as well. Two children pretending to be in a relationship, even though they've consummated it with rings and children. They got no business pretending to be married. I mean, to each their own, right? But when we have choices, we should make good choices. In a lot of areas of the world, they're still arranging marriages. Some areas of the world, like North Korea, they don't have words for gay. They don't have words for a lot of things that plague society that we have over here. And not that gay is a plague or anything. It's just they don't have the ability to be tolerant because they don't have a word for it. The girls will typically stay unengaged with males all the way up till their marriage. I mean, unengaged. There's a incredible defector from North Korea who's now in the United States, and she creates a channel. And I can't possibly say her name correctly. I think it's like Yeomi or something like that. She's an endearing person. She just did an episode, or at least I just watched it. But she was saying, we are so sequestered away from the opposite sex while in North Korea that we don't know how babies are made, and we actually think that if you hold hands, you'll get pregnant. The Alpha and Omega communicate. They share everything. The how-tos. If the dude isn't feeling good, he doesn't hesitate to tell his wife. He may not tell her with sobbing tears in his eyes, but he'll communicate somehow. But guess what? An Alpha Omega that is really connected at the hip and not being defensively cowardice in a relationship like a beta to an alpha female who's like, the couple in Miles in Frasier. He was the beta, and I'm trying to think of his wife's name that you never ever saw in the episode. She was the alpha, and that didn't work. He was cowering down to her the entire time. It's imbalanced. But an alpha-omega relationship, I can tell you, I've been in them my whole life, I think. They can just hear the tone of your voice on a telephone. And the most microscopic variation in your normal deliverance of a sentence, of an answer, without you trying to exhibit such a thing, they know. They know, man. I've had conversations over the last, 33 plus years. At times, it doesn't happen anymore, but with my high school sweetheart. Because we check out on each other every once in a while. Usually goes like 3 or 4 years, and then, hey, how you doing? Whatever. But I tell you what, I could chat with her through text back in the day. Say, go back about 15, 20 years. And she could just sense from the words I am typing into a chat exactly what's going on in my mind to an unbelievable empathic degree. Very rare emotions that I very rarely ever exhibit. Amazing. Why mention this entire thing? Aren't we in the middle of a gendered fluidity where a grown man can say that he can rape your boy because he identifies as a 7-year-old girl? I just saw another expose of a tranny reading stories to little kids in a kindergarten, as if they go to school to get their sexual identity. You were told it's a gene in your body that determines who you are, orientation-wise. But this latest insanity of the last 10 years should be extremely insulting to the LGBT community because it marginalizes that argument. Well, there's not a gene that makes you a furry. There's not a gene that makes you a Ninja Turtle. Those are social constructs that are taught in the mind. So, until we find this gene, we shouldn't be having sexual orientation conflicts in grade schools. If your kid is in a school that is conducting this, that is your responsibility, in my opinion, to get your kid out of that school or petition that that's not part of the curriculum. Now, sex ed, well, that's probably an important eds class to have. At some point, boys need to know and girls need to know about their own bodies and about how you can procreate. Girls need to learn ovulation. That's one thing that's never taught in America. I knew a girl, like I said, she had 2 kids and she was pregnant with the 3rd. And I said, and she was like kind of mystified how she's having all these kids. And I said, well, when do you ovulate? And she goes, what's that? I can imagine you get pregnant on your first kid and no one ever explained that to you. It's your parents' obligation to sit the kids down and do that. But how do you visit an OBGYN to the extent you can deliver a baby in a hospital and no one mentions it to you? That's how screwed up the system is. And that's the way they want it. If you're a parent or a grandparent, well, you know how terrifying it is to know that your children are stuck inside this system. If you plan on being a parent, boy, you hit the right episode if you're not already turning this off out of some protest. We want balance in the world, right? We want healthy relationships in the world because people's happiness spills out into the world, doesn't it? Why do we have a gigantic group of disenfranchised people on this planet? Because they've been following crappy advice for a really long time. And they get more and more angry that everything that they're told doesn't work or that they're not being told anything and their guesses are inaccurate. And they don't want to admit it out of hubris. And so they latch on to anything to abstract away from themselves their anger. So it's that thing, you get back what you put out. Well, they're putting out really bad vibes. A friend of mine, who I love dearly, she's going to hear this. And I passed it on to other friends, what she had said, and I really got some interesting responses. But she said, I think that you should experiment. She was talking about a drug I should take, a very mild one. Because she said, I think it'll help you get in touch with your feminine side. And I totally understand it, and I absolutely respect her opinion. I said, when I look back at my past, I think what I have done in my older age is naturally shed the beta training that society was giving me. And so I look back at my past, and I see I was always a very masculine guy verbally. But boy, I bought into some fashion that really was pretty questionable, just sort of, it's always it's dude stuff, but it was still not what I would wear today. And so I drew this on a piece of paper. I said, there's the alpha male. But what you're never told is about the omega female. You're just told asshole, alpha male, and poor woman who has to be beaten every night and beg for money, and she has to do everything the man says, otherwise he won't give her any spending money, which is the feminist fiction about the past. Did those things happen every once in a while? I'm sure they did. But I guarantee you, in my little tiny town, if anyone was caught doing that to their old lady, the dudes would beat the living shit out of the guy. I've told you guys stories, even in high school, man, where anything goes. One dude smacked his girlfriend. Now, she had hit him too, but she was a petite thing, and he had no business pushing it back out to her. So his buddies took him out in the woods and got him really drunk and beat the living shit out of him. And as the people who did it told me, to the edge of his life, and I don't know, he's like 3 to 5 miles outside of town, and they just left him there and said, you walk your ass home and you think about what you did, because we'll be back with some more if we ever hear this behavior again. And magically, he behaved for the rest of his life, so far at least. You still see this sort of behavior actually in third world countries. South America and Asia, especially China. I'll see these videos all the time where they're beating the living crap out of somebody, male or female. The females take care of the females and the males take care of the males in these countries. And they'll have the crime translated in the video. They're not killing these people. They're just spanking them like adults, that's all. It could be that a woman cheated. A single woman cheated on a married man. The males beat the crap out of him till his face is bleeding. They take the girl out and they spank him. In South America, they'll actually take, in India especially, they have a ritual of taking hot peppers and rubbing it all over their private parts. Meanwhile, the guy's getting his arms broken, all kinds of stuff. They teach each other what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. You had a problem with your marriage, try to work it out. Doesn't work out? Well, formally divorce then. At minimum, separate and let them know you're going to go be with other people so that there's no heartbreak there. But if you're going to be with other people, you might as well just cut the ties. But I'm drawing this on a piece of paper. And the next thing I drew was, I drew like a girl with boobs, stick figure, guy with his little Y chromosome hanging down. And I drew another set down below. And I drew the woman taller in the second section and the guy smaller. And I put an A on top of her head and a B on top of the dude's head. I said, that is an alpha female who's attracted to beta males. Again, to each their own. If you can make it work, if you want to be a Stockholm Syndrome dude your whole life, then just go do it. If that makes you happy, I'm not trying to change your mind. But for any of you that are trying to figure out where society has kind of lost its mind, I thought this episode might be useful. And I said, what you want me to do is take a drug so that I can get in touch with my feminine side. I said, what is that going to do? I said, that'll make me absolutely unattractive to an omega female, which is what I like. I don't care what body shape you are. I don't care what your skin color is. I will love you however you are. Just be strong. Be balanced. And so I pointed down at the other two characters and I said, look, I don't want this alpha male chick coming after me who's full of crap the whole time. Who's going to tell me that she can do everything I can do. Because she watches too many action movies where these 5'4", 120-pound celebrities are punching a 6'8" bodybuilder in the face and knocking him cold. Isn't that great training for your daughters? Oh, I can handle myself in a nightclub. I know girls that are 110 pounds who will lip right off to a dude who weighs 280 pounds. The last guy they punched is still in the hospital. And they have been convinced that they can take these guys on and no one's going to mess with me, or they think they're going to go get another guy who weighs 180 pounds to fight this 280-pound dude whose job is to pick people up and throw them outside of restaurants and nightclubs. And somehow this guy's going to go up and, risk his face. Again, the dude who might have a chance, knock another dude out, he's not attracted to her because she's an alpha female. Delusional. Now, I should say, just to loop back for a split second, when I see two feminine men together, who are probably gay, it makes complete sense to me. You're the same. Enjoy. Totally cool, man. I don't, what you do with your life is your thing. Do no harm and you'll be good, and none of them do any harm. So there you go. I wouldn't try to go around and convincing all the other kids in the neighborhood to be like you. That might get you in some trouble. Just be who you are. Live by example. I got plenty of friends who are like this. I got friends that are two alpha males that dig each other, or probably alpha omega, to be honest. But they're both dudes, and they live together for decades, and they're fine. What's the problem, right? But I'm not in that realm. So all I'm talking about in this episode is what I know. One of the things I have seen lately, and it's only in women who are probably within 5 years of my age, and typically younger, is that they remember their youth in the 70s and 80s. And in that youth, they remember the strong omega females that raised them, their mothers and their grandmothers and maybe their great-grandmothers. And they had recipes for the kitchen. They made their own clothes. They were very crafty in general. The children growing up in grade school had crafting projects because arts were still taught. But arts consistently open the mind, and so that's what's been defunded, to make sure there is no right brain abstract development that can see a conspiracy when it comes right at them. So I've seen some women from about 45 to 55 hit a point in their life where they realize, oh my God, I have not eaten this particular food since I was a child, and what the hell? Every single time my mother, speaking for them, made these meals, they constantly went back to get grandma's recipe. Not their mother's recipe, but their grandmother's recipe. 2 generations up. That famous apple pie, that famous pumpkin pie, the turkey recipe, the ham recipe, whatever it is, to make homemade noodles maybe. They didn't see it as weak. They saw it as strong. Look what I can do with just some flour and water and a little bit of table salt. I can make a meal and feed a Hulk who's my protector, feed my children. And I know that when they go to bed at night, they've had nourishment, organic nourishment. My family has a famous ice cream recipe. We've modified it over the years, so we got several different kinds. It's always vanilla, but there's one for the family members that shouldn't be eating too much sugar, and there's ones for people that can eat it all. People that are low lactose intolerant, we got ways of knocking down the cream, and it'll still taste exactly the same. And this year, right here on this patio in 4th of July, a friend of mine from my hometown and I, we made it right there. Like 2 gallons of it, man. We had to give half of it away to friends just because we had too much. It was euphoric. It was a little too creamy for me, but it was still delicious. Heritage. Missing. What's funny is if you ask a typical female today, and this isn't really a criticism whatsoever, this is us losing our culture, losing our tribe. If you said, hey, have you ever made your own clothes? I'd be like, what are you talking about? Today, that would be a sign of being poor. I had to make my own clothes. I was so poor. That's the way it's construed today. But in the 70s, I had 3 aunts, and we used to always go down to the fabric store, and I'm just like running around looking at all stuff. They'd buy a pattern they dug, buy the fabric, take it home. I'd watch them do the whole thing. I'd help cut out the patterns and pin stuff down and watch them sew this stuff together. It was considered a privilege to have the money and the talent to sew your own clothes. The better you sewed it, that became a bragging right. When I was in the Bay Area, One of my buddies, I used to call him Bluto because the dude looked just like Bluto, man. Nicest freaking guy on planet Earth. He married a woman overseas from Asia somewhere. Don't know where she was from. The dude's a big guy. I mean, he's Bluto. Bluto as a human being. No, I've shown pictures of this and movies of this guy to friends of mine. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, it's not just like, it kind of looks like him. It's him. So he's a big dude. Probably weighed 250 pounds and looked healthy. So he come to work after he got married and he had these amazing Hawaiian shirts. And I say amazing. One, it fit him perfectly. But two, they were just perfectly sewed. I mean, there was no difference. If anything, if you were to say to somebody who's like a big Versace guy or someone, a big fashion dude, hey, look at this shirt. What do you think about this shirt? Drool would start coming out of their mouth if they dug that kind of thing. John Lasseter would be so jealous, let me tell you. And then they would look at the stitching and look at all, and go, where did you get this? Why isn't there a label on it? And the dude's like, my wife makes me shirts. I was totally jealous. In fact, we all kind of talked about going down and getting a fabric and paying her to make us some shirts. I never followed up on it. I should have. Wow. Was she a weak female? Because she sewed him shirts? No, she was an Omega baller. And he was lucky as hell. We've lost our traditions. Males. All right. Let me give us a little test here, too, 'cause I've been kind of picking on the female side of things. All right, let's say this little apocalyptic moment occurs, and let's say you got an uncle that owns a ranch in the Midwest like me, and you show up, and you know how to shoot a gun, but you don't know how to shoot an arrow. Maybe your bullets run out, man, and you've got to hunt food. And let's just say, over the course of a week, you manage, out of pure starvation and feral focus, you managed to shoot a buck, a big deer. It's got a lot of meat on it, venison, should be good. Gonna be a little gamey. But hey man, you're starving, you don't care. Plus your Omega wife's like, dude, family's getting hungry. So you got it dead now. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, man? You know how to clean it? If you don't know how to clean an animal, it's gonna be an absolute catastrophe. You're gonna poison your whole family. Because you're going to cut the gut sac open, you're going to cut the entrails open, and it's going to spill all kinds of E. coli all over the meat. And let's just say you have a lot of meat, and maybe electricity is not a big commodity. What do you do now? You got more meat than you can eat. What are you going to do? If you grew up in California, you're probably SOL, man. If you grew up in Kansas, you grew up with Native American families all around you. You grew up with cowboys, dudes who still hunt today with bow and arrows like Ted Nugent. That dude will live until his last expiring breath, probably over 100 years old. You got to know how to tie it up. You got to know exactly how to make the cuts. If you're smart, you're going to cut it such that you can keep the fur. You're going to use every single piece of this animal. If you can't eat it all, well, you're going to try to figure out a way to beef jerky the meat, hang it up to dry. If you don't have any other way of preserving it, you'll know that salt is a natural preservative. Keep the bugs off of it until it's time to eat. You'll know about trains that used to transport beef without any refrigeration, and everything was packed inside salt layers. If you're a big prepper, then you might want to get on YouTube and watch a few how to skin an animal videos, from a cow to a pig to some of the natural animals in your area. And as much as you might think you're going to kill a bear, good luck with that. You're not going to probably be killing like a cheetah or a tiger. That's for people in Africa who know how to do those kind of things. But come on, you want something with meat on it, right? Maybe you get a moose in Canada or Alaska. But you better know what you're doing. Maybe you even find dudes around your area that still do it. Or you go online, you try to find a group that's going to go hunt. And maybe you're just there to look. You're just there to watch. They typically wouldn't let you just watch because they know, hey, if you're going to be here and if you're going to partake in any of this, then you got to pull your own. So here's the knife, and don't screw up. Watch me on the left. You're going to do the same thing on the right. You're going to know how to hunt birds. My uncle probably has, 20,000 turkeys on his land. Well, they travel in packs. They got the males out there looking for the hawks. You can't just go up on them. You have to shoot them with something. Trap them, something. Not exactly that intelligent. You scream, they scream. Chickens, everything. You got to know how to do this. And that's just beef. What if you're a vegetarian? You're like, man, I need to have seeds on hand. I got to be able to find some land that someone's not going to kill me for touching. Perhaps someone owns land, doesn't know how to till it, doesn't know how to make a garden, a field, a crop. You're going to find out why farmers make a ton of money. And you're no longer going to call them names for being millionaires because they're getting up at the crack of dawn and going to bed pretty much at sunset. And they are tired. Imagine all of us city folk trying to convert to survive. We got more to offer the world, more to offer society, but we got to make it through the pocket. It's going to be rough. This configuration of alpha and omega, in my opinion, is truly the configuration. I know listeners who are females, who are omegas, who have alpha males that they're married to. They're all their kids raised, they're all over the United States, and they live in really beautiful rural areas where all this is just a flick of a switch. Oh, we don't need power? All right, well, let's go to the closet and get our stuff out. Let's go fish. Cleaning a fish. Boy, if I've seen people clean fish, man, and just make a mess of everything. They don't know how to clean an ice between every cut. They don't know how to get salt water to put whatever they clean out of the fish off to the side. The gut sac is, again, another problem inside of a fish. They don't know how to start at the tail and work towards the head. In addition, one of the reasons why I believe countries like America with a fully functional Second Amendment are being attacked is to get rid of these alpha males, to send them off to war and kill them before they can procreate, to demonize them for that very action, for the loyalty to their country. Now, we know wars are all BS. We do. We know that potentially every alpha male should stick around, but part of the rite of passage for a male is to suck it up and do some things that are tough. And I mean really tough, not just math, right? Not just getting through a level of Metal Gear Solid with this, oh man, I'm such a sniper on the PS5 that it's no problem whatsoever to get out there and do it in real life. I would say that someone's really good in a video game would probably be pretty good hunting, at least in the kill portion of the game. But once it's dead, they don't know anything. The first time I hunted with my uncles, I was just cleaning these birds out. Man, they'd fly, and I'm pretty good with the gun anyway, but I never hunted with shotguns, these really designer Italian shotguns, man. But I would draw a fire, and boom, the bird would fall down. And one of my uncles, who's a doctor, he looked at me, he says it to my other uncle, he goes, God, it's just like he was born to do this. And I just looked at him and I said, that's 25 years of video game playing. But again, in terms of cleaning the birds, they had to teach me. Pull all the buckshot out, how to get the bird off of the meat, the outside of the bird, off the inside of the bird. And we ate those birds that night. My only regret is I didn't participate 100% in the process. Now, thankfully, during an apocalypse, some of the hunting rules go away, which makes it much easier to catch and kill animals. With our weapons today and our techniques today, you shouldn't go without food as long as you live in a rural area with those animals. But let's come back to the psychological part of the game. What's very interesting is that the masculinity of a man and the femininity of a woman is being robbed from those respective groups. You want to know what's going to make you feel more disenfranchised than anything else, but you won't be consciously aware of it? Is when your masculinity has been robbed, but you know that you have this genetic instinct to be a man. Why do you think there's so many bar fights at like bro bars? I've said this, 5 years ago, but here it is again. What is the multi-million year training for a human being? Well, the man would get with the other men, the other alphas, because there were no options. Even 150 years ago, there were no options. No beta would ever survive 150 years ago. Maybe he was in Europe where it was already developed, but that's about it. Maybe in Rome during Caesar's era, you became his dedicated eunuch. We used to get up, get together, organize, and hunt, which is nerve-wracking. But you also had to build up the courage and the chemical structure every day to go out and hunt and kill. So now we've got this same genetic instinct, which cannot be muted in the short time that we have ceased doing this. In America, we used to do this 150 years ago. You wouldn't eat if you didn't have this capability. Well, now what do we do with the chemical triggers that are going off all day long? Well, it depends on how you feel about being emasculated by the media, by Hollywood, by the people around you if you live in a liberal city. And so you just kind of bottle it all up, you push it inside, and you go to a bar. And now you're just pissed at life for probably what amounts to a PTSD of a masculinity. You don't know why. You just have this urge to fight, to kill. And you mistaken it for your fellow humans. All that energy and all that negativity is not supposed to be negative. It's supposed to be the courage that you have to manifest every morning to go out and do what you have to do to eat. Women, I have talked to women as young as 23, all the way up. And I would ask them, well, or someone would just tell me, but, they'd say, look, I want to just be married with kids, man. I want a job after I get my kids into school, but that's really what I want to do. And I feel like I can't tell my other female friends of mine because they would see that I am supposedly injuring this feminist movement, which is so important. Wow. So procreating now and building a solid family is demonized to the extent that women are getting PTSD because their maternal instincts are being compromised. They have children and they know that they should be home with their children because, one, they love them, but two, they know that the state is not going to do as good of a job as they would do. Plus, the family has traditions and standards, and how those standards and traditions are ever going to be instilled in your child when they spend most of their time in daycare or a public school, or even after-school events, right? Class is over at 3. In California, it's 2:15, and they get Wednesdays half days. I mean, it's nuts in California. The education system here sucks huge. If you're a kid who watches a bunch of Hollywood movies like me when I was a kid, and you have the delusion the California kids got it made, and you live in some rural little town somewhere in the world, and substitute California for whatever place you think is cooler that might be more modern and populated, trust me, you're winning the game in those little tiny towns almost every single time. They're imbalancing the world on purpose. We all know it. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of grit for your tires to actually make progress in your mind. And they'll want to demonize what I'm saying because I'm going against the agenda of everybody being upside down. Building a family is a negative thing now. And isn't it interesting that supposedly in these primitive cultures, and I'll just let you assume whatever that is, they believe in families still. They have big kids, big families, and probably big kids too. They have big families. Now, some of them go overboard because of their religion. That's still occurring. Masculinity being attached to how many children you have is about as stupid as your masculinity being attached to how many beers you can drink. If you're counting your beers at a party and bragging about that number, you got a lot of developing to do. Hopefully you'll make it. Trying to oppress people that don't exist is another fallacy of the world. Now, one of the big things that's going on in the absence of abundant alpha males and omega females, but of the ones that still exist, they're being suppressed and repressed to a great extent, is that when they want to exude their value systems, they're punished by those who don't really determine anything about their life. It'd be one thing if somebody said, we don't say that, and here's $100,000. And we hope that you learn not to say that anymore. And if you don't say it anymore, we'll pay for everything in your life. That never happens. So why do you care what they say? I look at YouTube channels that are full of millions and millions of subscribers. They do silly things like review every episode of Mandalorian. They'll take their obsessions and make channels of them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I look at my regiment with you guys. I make very complex videos, very long videos. It makes the editing long. It makes, because I work all day, I got to do these things. It's right now, it is 3:58 at night, and it's 46 degrees outside. This is more important to me than me cannibalizing all the knowledge I've got about video games or whatever Star Wars franchise and making a copycat channel like those other ones, because they apparently can't get enough of that stuff. I am toying with an educational class in Blender 3D, but there are so many good channels out there that do the exact same thing. I'm trying to see, I know that the way I teach is different than the way anyone else teaches, and I believe that my techniques work a lot faster, and so I've got some techniques I'm going to probably integrate in, but I have to lock in my mind something that has more value than someone else's channel. It doesn't negate their value, it just is a different voice teaching you a different way that I believe is superior. And I will make you a power user from day one instead of you just being kind of confused and overwhelmed by so many features. But cowarding down to society to make money, man, I'm going to tell you something I usually don't tell you guys, but I guarantee you, if I was willing to live in a place I didn't like and cut my hair short, this is not exaggeration because I've had the offer more than once in the last 5 years, probably last 7 years. Yours truly could be making anywhere from $250,000 to probably $500,000 a year. And you might say, well, then you're stupid. Look at that retirement package for you. The only problem is I got to live inside this suit, this meat suit that I'm wearing. I got to look in the mirror every morning. I got to figure out if I'm being true to myself. And when I look at those options, I just think, you know what? It's funny. Of the family members that I have that have followed all the rules and cowered down every single time they were told to move because their job said, hey, I know you were born and raised in this town, but I want you to move you clear across the United States. And by the way, your hair's getting a little too long and you really don't wear suits enough. And they'll tell you that you can't close $1 million deals looking any other way. And it's like, too late for my game. But they do it. And they'll have the retirement. They'll have the big bank accounts. And they'll own their homes and whatever. But in the end, they didn't live life. They may even go to Europe once every 2 years on a big 2-week vacation. But they'll be standing inside the Roman Colosseum looking up Wikipedia to find something out about it. And that's going to be the utter extent of their journey outside of the little town they live in. So in my personal opinion, they will never have lived their entire life. But they will look down on me, oh gosh, our relative, he's got this thing he's trying to do, don't understand what he's doing. Oh gosh, I hope at one point he has a good moment in his life. It's like, dude, it started a long time ago and it's never stopped. And hopefully you're the same way. It's one of those, it's like the old saying, live free or die. All right, well, that definitely applies to hopefully your country. But boy, the majority of this world population is not engaging that. And supposedly, as a minor digression, the idea is, well, you're primitive if you don't want to work with your fellow man to build a better world and therefore cower down into all this surveillance and all this other stuff. So untrue. There's a reason why the entire freaking planet wants to migrate to America. Now, they don't want to, in some cases, keep it going the way that it was. Omar being one of them, right? The ones that are true to our country, they come from all different countries. They see the American dream. They know how to work hard. They work harder than Americans because you know why? They saw tyranny where they were. So many people in Orange County, California right now come into the smoke lounge being first-generation immigrants. And they're yelling in the room going, I just came from a country that took away our guns, that told us what jobs we were going to have. When I was robbed and my wife was raped or whatever, there was nothing I could do because the police were in on it if they weren't the ones that did it. And now I'm watching this faction in America, and the media especially, participating in the destruction of the country as if there's some long-term plan for them, which there isn't. Again, when you betray your own kind to facilitate change for the global elite, you're the first one that gets liquidated because you're a traitor. And they won't allow traitors in their world. They'll use you like a tool. Once you give them what you can give them, and that could end very quickly, right? You could just do one speech, and that's it. That's all they think you can do. Poof, you're cut off, and now you're one of us, wondering what happened. The other thing that happens in my experience living in a small town and seeing these alpha and omega couples is they keep each other in check. Because we all slip. No major slip, not infidelity or anything that, intense, acute. But when someone gets complacent, when someone needs a pep talk, they're right there. And if one of them gets sick, the other one stands right next to them and gets them through it. And if for whatever reason they pass, they felt like they lost their partner in life. And some of them are able to reconstitute a relationship with someone who's got equal stature. Sometimes they don't, though. Sometimes they're in their 70s and they're just like, oh gosh, I outlive my husband. In almost every case in that particular realm where I came from. When you raise kids, boy, people worry about when they're young about all these, put down the toilet seat, put the cap on the toothpaste. Oh, that's probably a good training wheel there. But when it comes to raising children, how to discipline them and stuff, hopefully you've had the conversation before they enter the world so you can kind of not run into conflict live on TV, meaning in front of your children. Usually, in my experience, the alpha and omegas don't argue in front of their children as a principle. If it starts to occur, whoever's least vested in the argument will step forward and say, either another time, because we're not home, there's no place for us to go outside of the ear or eyesight of our child. We'll talk about this later. And they typically do just automatically fall in line. Or they'll simply leave the kids in the front room and they'll kind of whisper, yell at each other in the bedroom. They don't want to traumatize their kids because there is balance. And with balance, you get perspective. When you're just winging it constantly, well, then you never really know what you're doing. You're not doing anything very well at all. The other thing is this. If you are not married yet, which I am not, then there is a hunt for that person. And to the degree you recognize the benefit of such a thing, you will suspend other endeavors at times to prioritize that search. When you put it this way, if you're young and you're hearing this message and you agree with it, you don't have to, then you can hunt properly, in my opinion. And once you do find the union with someone that is balanced with you, nothing's perfect, okay? Marriage is a job every single day. Some days you have to wake up and choose to love the other person. Sometimes it's just that's life. But in the long run, it turns into this beautiful logarithmic graph of just happiness and balance, right? Because I tell you, what bothers you as a young person doesn't bother you as much when you get older. And you'll inherit new things as you get older. But here's the beautiful self-empowering thing with I think a properly balanced nuclear family built out of the alpha and omega configuration. You become the most powerful person you have ever become in your lifetime. And it just manifests every single day that transpires past the point of union. Why? Because you're not worried about that part of your life. There's balance in the home. Doesn't mean there won't be problems, right? Your kid's going to turn 13 and discover the opposite sex or whatever sex they're attracted to. Again, typically an alpha and omega family, it stays alpha and omega when the kids get older because they've been taught. This is the way it really works. And they'll also start subliminally, if not consciously, noticing families that are struggling because it's an alpha-beta relationship or beta-alpha. For me, in my lifetime, I have known of families that had major frickin' problems. And the husband was a beta and the mother was an alpha. I've just heard horrific stories where children watched family brawls occur, where an uncle is beating up his sister, who is the mother of these children, and they sat there and watched it happen. And the most sickening thing, because I knew the father, who pretends to be alpha, it's just hilarious. Maybe he's grown there since he watched this occur. But the dude stood supposedly at the door jamb and watched his brother-in-law beat up his wife. When I tell that story to people, to other alpha males, which is the only thing I try to hang out with, there's just this like almost instinctual goosebumps of anger of like, how could you do that? This is your wife. This is a woman being beat up by a man. I don't care if it's the brother-in-law. I'm going to kick him so fucking hard that, I'll have to wipe the shit off my boot. Because this guy's going to fucking die. I mean, I'm just going to beat him to the point where it's jail time, man. And to know the guy that watched this and see him at like little family gatherings, he's not of relation, but, and I just see him try to be all manly, and it's just like, dude, you're a pussy. You did a big pussy move, dude. Maybe you've changed, and I'll give someone that thing, but until I know otherwise, man, you're just like the epic pinnacle of pussy. And you know what? What if the brother-in-law is way bigger than you? Guess what, dude? If you're an alpha, you will be a superhuman during those kind of situations. It's not all about being, a brute force person. A typical alpha male knows when to pull back. A fight is one of the last things an alpha does because they have balance. They have perspective. They can look at things. But when something goes hot, guess what? That's why you're an alpha. That's why alphas become soldiers. But what's interesting is if you know anyone in the military, I've been privileged to be raised in the military, you'll meet, say, an infantry guy. And he has one level of processing war. And then you'll meet like a Navy SEAL. When you meet a Navy SEAL or a Ranger or a Special Forces dude, there's a difference. There's a massive difference in the intellect between these two individuals. What's the difference? They have pauses inserted in their actions. And infantry guys get there too, the more they spend time in these tumultuous situations. And that's why there's so many Hollywood scripts. There's a great Twilight Zone with Leonard Nimoy in it. If you just look that up, it's the only episode he was ever in. But it's about a fight in the Pacific Asian War. The Japanese War with the Americans. And there's two little platoons that are, one of them's hidden in a cave, the Japanese are in the cave, and the Americans are up on a hillside. And they've both had it. They've both been at it, shooting mortars and shooting at each other. And then this wet behind the ears officer arrives. I don't think he's a captain or something like that. Nothing, he's a lieutenant. And he's all gung-ho, boy. He wants to get his kill count up. He's just read the books. He knows how to do it. And he's just all gung-ho to get in there and kill those Japs, as he said. And then the irony was he turned around. His men are trying to talk him out of it. His men are like, oh, we know you're kind. We know you're kind. You just want a little kill count, don't you? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, and you should too. Trying to use the book to get them to align with his personal inequities, right? But he turns around and walks like 10 feet, and all of a sudden, Mr. Rod Serling turns the guy into a Japanese soldier, and he's in the cave. And now all of a sudden, the tables have turned. And now he's even got an accent, and they did a little makeup on him, and everyone else is Japanese on the set. And they're sort of like the soldiers are sort of, talking like the other soldiers on the other side. Maybe we can just kind of let them, maybe they'll just go away, And there's one officer there who's kind of nipping at his heels because he's not the man in charge. He's definitely an upper echelon Japanese soldier. But I think there's one guy over him who's kind of barking what he was barking. And he turns his whole perspective around because they're Americans on the other side. So initially he's doing it because they're Americans, but over the course of 5 minutes to 10 minutes, he realizes what his men were talking about. And then, of course, after a little bit of time passes, he walks and turns, and all of a sudden he's back to where he was, and he's an American again. And he learned his lesson in a really short period of time. He got a little alpha lesson. And hey, relax, One of the movies that I think portrays this extremely well, and I hate to give you a fictional example as a way to kind of beacon towards this, but Kurt Russell's movie Tombstone was a phenomenal example. So Kurt Russell and his brothers, they're all different ages, playing the Wyatt Earp, the Earp family. But Sam Elliott's character is one of the older brothers. And Sam Elliott, in my opinion, I've never met the gentleman, but I'm willing to bet because he seems to play a very similar character wherever he ends up, I'm willing to bet he is as pure alpha as it gets in the real world as well, meaning he inserts the pause. However, as portrayed in the fictional movie, there's a point when you have to fight back. And the other interesting thing is that we've also had sort of romantic stories like maybe a King Arthur franchise or something like that, where you have honor, maybe a samurai movie, where you have honor installed inside conflict, where, okay, we're going to go at it, but let's do it honorably. One of the most famous stories I ever heard, and I don't know if it's true, was that a samurai was assigned to killing somebody. And the samurai finally finds his target after a really long search, and he goes up, and apparently, as I understand the technique back in the day, was that you would read off your sort of family heritage to identify who you were. You would read them essentially what they're being charged with that would result in their death. And to the credit of the person being stalked by this samurai, he knew a little trick. He waited till the guy said all that stuff, and then he spit in the guy's face. And the samurai just pulled back. The samurai had his sword out, and he was ready to do the old head lobbing thing. And he put the sword back in his sheath and left. And of course, the person listening to the story for the very first time says, why'd he do that? He finally found the guy that was really hard to find. Why on earth would he cower down? And the answer was, because a samurai doesn't kill out of personal anger. A samurai only kills out of the duty to the empress or the emperor. And when he got spit on, he suddenly made the kill personal, and that violated the code of the samurai. Now imagine that. Let's just say that either did or didn't happen, but that's a Sam Elliott move. That's an alpha male move. You will see bar fights that nearly happen, and someone will be very intelligent. And they'll walk up to those that are in the dispute and say a few little friendly words or give them some perspective, and it works even when they're drunk. That's what's amazing about these sort of really seasoned alpha male men. And think about the overhead to society with that. Well, the overhead that would happen if a bar fight occurs, we have 2 injured males or more, maybe someone fatally injured. And the person who stepped in and neutralized the entire situation out of pure maturity saves society 2 broken people, 2 broken souls that have to wake up the next day broken, or some of them maybe not waking up at all. And it's not as if the alpha looks for those situations and enjoys them. He's going to wake up annoyed the next day that he had to step in at all, that his life was interrupted. But it was necessary. There are wonderful things about how we've been set up genetically on this world. And I think that we can look at when countries have thrived and when they started to fall apart. It is unequivocal now that every country trying to absorb all of this crazy over the last 10 years is not functioning well. It has given a rationale for destructive protests, which some other individuals use as a mechanism for looting and destroying people's properties. People trying to defend their businesses have died because of these groups doing what they do. I guarantee you at any one of the homes of those that are going out and destroying countries, not just peaceful protests, that's fine. They don't have an alpha and omega at home. At best, they've got an alpha beta or two betas. Unwilling to engage their children in any disciplinary way because they don't know how to do it. Now, how did the disruption and the deception take effect? Well, it's because the unsuspecting alpha omega parents did what every person on earth should be allowed to do, which is trust their government, trust their media, trust that movies are just simply forms of entertainment with a little bit of introspection perhaps hidden in the subtext, but not one that's trying to sway how your child looks at themselves in the mirror, creating insecurities that don't really have any basis in reality. Nevertheless, they absorb them almost like a pandemic of its own. Now, just closing out, I want to finish off with sort of an interesting trend that is first sold to you as a cliche. Some people have this happen in their life and some people don't. I think there are different reasons for it, which is typically the midlife crisis. I think there are real midlife crises, and I think that there are fake ones. I think there's the real ones would be someone randomly changing their life, and the archetype of a typical midlife crisis is that you realize you're leaving your youth, and you try to desperately grab it. And so you go off and buy the motorcycle. You don't know how to drive. I don't know. I don't know what the ladies do. I honestly don't. Maybe hang out at a nightclub and pretend like you're single. I don't know. Maybe you are single. But these people are confused. They also almost instantaneously regret any change they did that is the result of this midlife crisis. It's usually very short-lived, and sometimes it comes with some problems. They wreck the motorcycle and become crippled and paralyzed, and it was like, what did I do that for? I didn't even want to do that, but I was so lost in my absorption from media and movies and magazines and whatever that I thought I should look like I'm 25 for the rest of my life. Now, the one that is not a midlife crisis that typically gets confused for midlife crisis is actually a wonderful phase in someone's life where you, as I always say in the analogy, you were a pinball in the pinball machine being controlled by the flippers, the bumpers, the kickers, everything. You weren't scoring anything, though. It was controlling you. Because when you were young, no one said to you, or you never figured it out, that you can actually play your own video game. You can write your own script. And so somewhere, your 40s, your 30s, your 50s, somewhere in there, you figured out, you know what? No one that I thought, well, everyone I thought I was impressing doesn't exist. And so, you know what? I'm just going to live my life for me and do whatever I want to do with my life. And I'll do no harm while I'm doing it. I think that's what happened to me when I grew out my hair. I mean, a weird little thing. I was just real busy in my game company. It was about 2007, and I just stopped cutting it. And I just kept combing it and combing it. It had that awkward phase, it's all on my face. And eventually, just about the time I was considering to cut it back again, one of my partners, who's a female, who's married to my other partner, she said, you're really good with long hair. It wasn't this long. But when she said that, I was headed off to the restroom at this big law school that we were using for our conference room. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, yeah, you know what? I really respect her opinion. And guess what? I feel pretty good about this. I've only grown my hair out one time, but I never grew it out I think like I do now, where it's every single hair is long. Like I had the party in the back, that kind of thing. Now, it does help that I have genetics where we don't age as fast as other people. It's that Anunnaki blood, man. It's really good for you. Here's what's interesting about this this particular episode, and I think a lot of the episodes I try to throw at you guys that are more cerebral. The only place you get life lessons outside of living life yourself, which is a very slow, tumultuous situation where you're making a ton of mistakes, is usually your alpha and omega parents. It could be your grandparents or your parents. Like that's really who my parents were. They were the mature ones. Not perfect, but boy, they knew a lot of wisdom, man. Sometimes they say things I didn't even understand, but I chewed on it for 2 decades until I was like, ding, oh my God, that's it. And usually it dinged because I made a mistake that would have been avoided had I just understood their advice in the first place. But you can go get a PhD in college. You can take every Tony Robbins course, insert any other dude who's like that. You can go into business, schools and stuff on the side. You can go to, sound baths and all that good stuff. And they have their wonderful things that they will give to you. Believe me, I recommend almost all that stuff, if not every single bit of that stuff. But what you don't get is life lessons. So here we are living life. Where's the manual? There's no manual. And the older you get, you realize that life is actually extremely short. Because even if you live 100 years, your body is deteriorating quicker than your ambitions. And so let's say you're 70 and because God came down and told you, you're going to live to be 100. So now you're 70 years old going, geez, man, I'm going to live another 30 years. That's a huge lifespan right there. Now, 70 is not as old as it used to be. 70 is actually extremely functional. My buddy Sid Mead lived to be 86, and he was pretty much painting until about 84. So you want to get as much stuff done as you can, and interruptions in your life for mistakes that are avoidable, and mistakes that if you had the right source, even if you don't agree with the suggestions that are coming perhaps out of this channel, you will find the ones that you agree with and thus live a life more according to your desires by arguing with me in your mind. And it's like a win-win situation, man. If you dig what I'm saying and you find wisdom in it, take it, roll. If you're like, man, that dude's full of crap, it's like this, because this works for me. Boom, you just double down on your own beliefs. Positive. It's just, there's nothing to it. So that's really it. This just came to me a couple days ago on the way to articulate this. I had another conversation tonight on telephone with a friend of mine for at least 2 hours. I thought, man, it's time to make this episode because it's very clear to my mind. One of the things, and I'm going to digress heavily here, and this is going to be just a small discussion about other YouTube channels that I'm seeing, plus a lot of conversations I'm having with friends. I mentioned this in a very minor way recently, but I just feel like talking tonight, even though it's 4:30 in the morning. There's some weird thing going on with humanity right now that I do not believe has been going on my entire life. And it seems to be perhaps I don't know, it could be a chemical, neurological thing. We're being poisoned or something. It could be, that's the most cynical view of that. Or it's simply a degradation in our education. Maybe it's a result of a lack of communication with other human beings. I'm very fortunate that I've created this channel where even though I'm sitting here talking to myself, I have your feedback and I just have a regimen. I push myself every day to come up with a new episode that's interesting, hopefully. But repetition in speech seems to be at an all-time high, and I can't understand it. People will, or they'll meander in conversation, right? They'll say, oh, this amazing thing happened to me down at the grocery store today. Okay. And it was like, this alien thing. But I'll tell you. Oh, really? Let me tell you. Sir. Okay. Well, I was at the store. What's the store name again? It's the one that's got like pineapple in its name and it's over there on Silver Street. That street. That street is where I grew up as a kid. And, when I was a kid and they just meander completely away from the store and you're like, whoa. I don't give a crap whose first name is the manager of the store, unless that's important. What happened to you that was so cool with this UFO or whatever thing you were talking about? Oh, yeah. Well, I'll get back to that. Blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, my God, what's wrong with communication these days? But the other one that I run into in tutorial videos and these political videos that people make that I watch, because I'm forced to in some cases, is they will repeat the same thing 4 to 10 times in a row, not to reiterate throughout an episode. And maybe not, like if they repeat the same thing between 2 episodes because it's still hot or it's something they want you to remember, totally get it. But they will simply sit there and loop as if they don't have an editing bay that they're going to put their movie through to go, oh my God, I just said the same thing 10 times in a row. Well, let's cut out the other 9 and just say it once. Take the best out of 9, or best out of 10 or whatever it is, right? It's a weird thing. I wanted to say that because there's no way I can make an episode on it. But I want to know if you guys are seeing the same thing. Because it sure seems like there's a dumb ray coming down on human beings right now. But I'm thinking, because of 2020, especially, where interhuman communication has been demonized to facilitate this sort of degradation in mankind, which is one reason why we got to open back up and get everyone back together again, because we weren't too good off when this thing started. Got some good English for you. Anyway. Hopefully you found this interesting. As always, I'm going to give you a really short bumper today. Go to deepthoughtsradio.com and please bookmark it just in case we get thrown out. Everything you could possibly want's on there. You want to bookmark it just in case this particular channel gets, fact-checked by a moron. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.